The morning bell echoed through the hallways as students rushed to their classes. Laughter filled the air, lockers slammed, and sneakers squeaked on the polished floor. In the middle of all the noise, a quiet girl walked slowly, her books pressed tightly against her chest. She kept her head down, trying to move without drawing attention. Her backpack was old, her shoes worn, and her clothes plain. To others, she seemed invisible, but to a few cruel eyes, she was an easy target. As she turned the corner, a group of students whispered and laughed. One of them nudged another and said just loud enough for her to hear, "There she is again. Does she even know how to smile?" They laughed as she passed, but she didn't react. She had learned long ago that silence was safer. Arguing only made things worse, so she kept walking, her eyes on the floor, her heart heavy but quiet. Inside the classroom, she sat in the last row near the window. The seat was always empty beside her because no one ever chose to sit there. She took out her notebook, flipping to a blank page. The teacher began to talk, but her mind drifted. Outside, she could see the tall trees swaying in the wind. The sunlight hit the glass just right, and for a moment she felt a small bit of warmth. It was the only part of her day that felt peaceful. During lunch, she sat at the edge of the cafeteria where no one bothered to come. Her lunchbox contained a simple sandwich and an apple. Around her, laughter bounced off the walls. She could see groups of friends sharing food, showing each other things on their phones and joking loudly. She had once tried to join a table, but the moment she sat down, everyone went quiet, then stood up and left. That was the last time she tried. When she finished her food, she took out a small sketchbook. It was her secret companion, the only place she could be herself. She began to draw quietly, soft lines, shapes, and faces. It was the only thing that made her forget where she was. But peace never lasted long. A shadow fell across her table. She looked up to see a few students standing there. "What's that?" one of them asked, grabbing at her sketchbook. She held it tightly, but he pulled it out of her hands anyway. They flipped through it and laughed. "What are these supposed to be? You think you're some kind of artist?" She reached out quietly and said, "Please give it back." But they just laughed harder. "Ah, she talks," one of them mocked. Another added, "No wonder you sit alone. Who'd want to hang out with a freak who draws sad pictures?" Her stomach tightened, her throat burned, but she didn't say another word. She just waited. Eventually, one of them tossed the sketchbook onto the floor, and they walked away, still laughing. She knelt down, picked it up, and brushed the dust off the pages. The corner was torn, but the drawings were safe. She sighed softly and put it back in her bag. Then she sat there in silence, the noise of the cafeteria fading into the background. After school, she walked home along the same route she always took. Her shoes scraped the pavement, her steps slow but steady. The streets grew quieter as she moved away from the busy blocks and closer to her neighborhood. Her home was small, an old building with faded paint and a broken fence. But when she opened the door, she smiled for the first time that day. Her mother was sitting in a chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket. "You're home early," her mother said softly, her voice weak but warm. "Yes," the girl said, setting her bag down. "How are you feeling today?" Her mother smiled faintly. "Better now that you're here." The girl moved to the kitchen, warming up soup on the stove. The house was quiet except for the sound of the pot bubbling. When she brought the bowl to her mother, she sat beside her. "Did you rest today?" she asked gently. Her mother nodded. "A little. Did you have a good day at school?" The girl hesitated, then forced a small smile. "It was fine." Her mother looked at her for a moment, studying her eyes. She could tell there was something behind that answer, but she didn't press. "You're such a strong girl," she said softly. "You always have been." The girl nodded, but her chest ached. She didn't want her mother to worry. After her mother fell asleep, she sat by the small desk in the corner of the room. She opened her sketchbook again, the same one that had been mocked earlier. The torn corner made her pause, but she shook her head and began to draw. Slowly, the lines came together. A picture of her mother smiling, holding her hand. Drawing was her way of healing, her quiet voice when words couldn't come out. The world could laugh all it wanted, but here in her small space, she was safe. She stayed up late, sketching until her eyes grew heavy. When she finally went to bed, she whispered a small promise to herself. "Someday, I'll make something beautiful out of all this pain." The next morning, she walked into school again, moving quietly through the hallway. The same laughter, the same whispers followed her. She didn't look up. She just kept walking. She had learned that sometimes silence was not weakness and it was survival, but deep inside something was changing. Each cruel word didn't just hurt her. It fueled her. It made her want to prove, not to them but to herself, that she was more than what they saw. The hallway that echoed with their laughter would one day echo with her name. Not because she fought back, but because she endured. Days turned into weeks, and the routine repeated. She woke early, walked to school, faced the whispers, and came home to care for her mother. On weekends, she worked at a small corner store a few blocks away, helping stock shelves and clean up. The owner, an old man, was kind. He noticed her quiet nature and sometimes left her small notes on the counter. "Keep going. You're doing great." Those words meant more to her than he could ever know. At school, she started avoiding the cafeteria altogether. Instead, she ate her lunch in the library. It was quiet there, filled with the soft rustle of pages and the smell of old books. The librarian never bothered her. Sometimes she even left art magazines on the table, pretending it was by accident. Maybe she had noticed the sketchbook that always peeked out of the girl's bag. One afternoon, as she sat sketching in the library, her art teacher walked by. He paused and said softly, "You're very talented." She looked up, startled. "Don't hide it," he said kindly. "You have something spec." The next few weeks passed slowly, but something inside the quiet girl began to shift. The words of her art teacher kept echoing in her mind. "You have something special." It was the first time anyone had believed in her outside of her mother. And even though she still faced the same stares and laughter in the hallways, she carried that small piece of encouragement like a secret flame inside her heart. Each night after finishing her homework and taking care of her mother, she would sit by the window with her sketchbook. The moonlight fell softly across the pages as she drew. Her hands moved quickly, almost without thinking. She drew everything she felt but could never say. Loneliness, hope, love, fear. Her drawings told stories that words couldn't, and each new sketch was better than the last. One Saturday morning, her art teacher called her after class. "I've been thinking," he said kindly. "Our school is hosting an art exhibition next month. Students from all grades will be showing their work. I'd like you to submit something." Her heart skipped. "Me?" she asked quietly. He smiled. "Yes, you. You have real talent. Don't hide it." She didn't know what to say. The thought of putting her art out for everyone to see terrified her. She imagined the same students who mocked her laughing again, but this time at her drawings. Still, the idea of finally showing what she loved so deeply was tempting. That night she told her mother about it. "An art exhibition?" her mother said, smiling weakly. "That's wonderful." "I don't know," the girl said softly. "What if they don't like it? What if they laugh?" Her mother reached out, taking her hand. "People laugh when they don't understand something beautiful. Don't let their noise stop your song." Those words stayed with her. For the next few weeks, she poured her heart into her work. She used every spare moment to draw, using old pencils and scraps of paper. Her subject was close to her heart. It was a picture of a girl standing in the middle of a crowded hallway. Everyone around her was blurred and faceless, but she stood clear, with her eyes closed, surrounded by a soft light. It was about being unseen yet holding strength inside. When the exhibition day finally arrived, she stood nervously near the back of the room. The school gym had been turned into a small gallery. Paintings, sculptures, and photos lined the walls. Students and parents moved from one display to another, talking and smiling. Her piece was on one of the side panels. She stood far enough away that no one would notice her watching. At first, no one stopped. Her stomach twisted. But then, slowly, a few teachers and students began to gather in front of her artwork. Someone whispered, "Who made this?" Another said softly, "It's beautiful." Her art teacher saw her standing in the back and waved her over. "Come on," he said gently. "They want to meet the artist." She froze for a moment, then took a slow breath and walked forward. People turned as she approached. The same students who used to laugh at her were now staring in silence. One of them said quietly, "You drew this?" She nodded, unsure what else to say. "It's amazing," another student said. "How did you do it?" She looked at the painting for a long moment. "I just drew what I felt," she said simply. Her teacher smiled proudly. That's what real art is. As the exhibition went on, more people came to see her piece. Some teachers even asked if she had more work to show. Her heart felt light. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. People saw her, really saw her. That evening when she got home, her mother was sitting by the window again. "How did it go?" she asked eagerly. The girl smiled for the first time in weeks. "They liked it," she said softly. "They really liked it." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "I told you. The world just needed to see what I already knew." From that day, things slowly began to change. The same classmates who had ignored her now greeted her in the hallway. Some even apologized for how they had treated her. Though she was still quiet, she smiled more often. The sketchbook that once felt like her secret now felt like her strength. But not everyone was happy about it. There was one girl in particular who had always been the center of attention. Confident, popular, and used to being admired. She didn't like that the quiet girl was now getting all the praise. One afternoon, she whispered to her friends. She probably didn't even draw that herself. The whispers began again, though quieter this time. The quiet girl noticed, but she didn't let it break her this time. She had learned that people's opinions couldn't change her truth. However, one day something happened that tested her resolve. After class, she returned to her desk to find her sketchbook missing. Panic hit her immediately. She searched everywhere, her bag, the classroom, the hallway. It was gone. Later that day, as she walked past the notice board near the cafeteria, she froze. Her sketches were there, but not the way she had displayed them before. Someone had copied her drawings, wrote mocking captions under them, and pinned them up for everyone to see. The hallway filled with laughter again. "Did you see those?" "Some." The weeks after the art club began were some of the happiest the quiet girl had ever known. Every afternoon she stayed behind to help younger students with their drawings. They laughed, shared crayons, and filled the classroom with a joy she had never felt before. For the first time, she wasn't the quiet, invisible student sitting in the corner. She was someone people looked up to, someone they wanted to learn from. The teacher often stood in the doorway watching her patiently guide the children. "You've grown," he told her one day. "You're not hiding anymore." She smiled softly. "I guess I just needed to find my place." And that place was here, surrounded by colors, paper, and the sound of laughter. It was a world where no one mocked her for being quiet or different. Instead, her quietness made others feel safe. At home, things were still difficult. Her mother's health was fragile, and there were days when she couldn't get out of bed. The girl did everything she could, cooking, cleaning, helping her mother take her medicine. She never complained. She just wished she could do more. One night, her mother took her hand and said, "I'm proud of you. You've made something beautiful out of your pain." Those words gave her strength. She started saving small amounts of money from her weekend job, keeping it aside for something special. Her dream was to one day take her mother to a real art gallery, not just pictures in her sketchbook, but a real place filled with paintings that inspired her. At school, the art club continued to grow. New students joined each week, and soon the teacher suggested they host their own small exhibition. "You'll lead it," he told her. "You've earned it." Her eyes widened. "Me, lead it?" He nodded. "You've inspired these students. They believe in you." The idea filled her with both excitement and fear. It meant standing in front of people again, speaking, organizing, being seen. But deep down she knew she couldn't let fear stop her anymore. The following days were filled with preparation. She helped her classmates choose their best drawings, helped the younger ones fix mistakes, and worked on a new piece of her own, one that showed her journey. She drew a hallway again, but this time, the same girl from her earlier piece stood surrounded by others who smiled at her. It was about healing, about turning pain into light. The day of the art club exhibition arrived quickly. The room was filled with colorful drawings, laughter, and chatter. Parents, teachers, and students came to see the work. The quiet girl stood by the main display, trying to stay calm. When it was time to speak, her teacher gently encouraged her. "Go on," he said. "They're waiting for you." She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her voice shook at first, but then it grew steady. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "When I first started drawing, it was something I did to escape the world. I never thought it would help me find my place in it. Every drawing here has a story, and every person who made one has courage. I'm proud of all of them." The room was silent for a moment, then applause filled the space. Her eyes widened, not from surprise but from something deeper, gratitude. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. After the event, several parents came to thank her. "My daughter loves your class," one mother said. She talks about you all the time. Another parent added, you have a gift. You should keep teaching, her teacher smiled at her proudly. See? You've made a difference. But just as things seemed perfect, life had another test waiting. One afternoon, as she returned home, she noticed her mother sitting quietly, her hands trembling slightly. Are you okay? She asked, rushing over. Her mother smiled faintly. Just tired, she whispered. Don't worry. But the worry never left. In the following days, her mother grew weaker. She tried to hide it, pretending everything was fine, but her daughter could see the pain in her eyes. One night, after tucking her mother into bed, she sat by the window and stared at the stars. She whispered softly, Please, don't take her from me. The next morning, her teacher noticed something was off. Her smile was gone, replaced by quiet sadness. After class, he asked, Are you okay? She nodded quickly. I'm fine. He didn't push, but he left a small note on her desk before leaving. Even strong people need help sometimes. You're not alone. That night, her mother's condition worsened. The girl called for help, and soon the small house was filled with worried neighbors and the sound of sirens. She stood in the corner, her heart pounding as the paramedics worked. One of them looked up and said gently, She needs to come with us. The hospital was bright, cold, and silent. She sat in the waiting area, her hands trembling, clutching her sketchbook like a lifeline. Hours passed before a doctor came out. His expression told her everything before he even spoke. Her mother had fallen asleep peacefully and wouldn't be waking up again. The world seemed to stop. The walls blurred, the floor felt far away. Everything she had fought so hard to hold together suddenly felt like it was crumbling. She went home that night to an empty house. The same chair by the window, the same blanket but no warmth. She sat down and opened her sketchbook, staring at the blank page for a long time. Then she began to draw, not to forget but to remember. She drew her mother smiling, surrounded by light, holding a paintbrush. It was her way of saying goodbye. Tears fell, but they didn't feel as heavy as before. Her mother had always told her to turn her pain into beauty. So that's what she did. The next few days were difficult. The neighbors helped her with meals, and the school counselor checked on her often. Her teacher came by to make sure she was okay. Take your time, he told her. We'll be here when you're ready. But she didn't stop drawing. In fact, she drew even more. It became her way to keep her mother close. Slowly, she started feeling something new. Not just sadness, but purpose. One evening, while cleaning the house, she found a small envelope under her mother's pillow. Inside was a letter written in her mother's handwriting. It said, My beautiful girl, if you're reading this, it means I've gone somewhere you can't follow yet. But don't be sad. I've watched you grow into someone kind, strong, and full of light. Don't let life harden you. Keep drawing, keep smiling, and keep helping others see beauty where they think there is none. That's your gift. Love. Always, Mom. She held the letter to her chest, tears streaming down. Days passed, and the whispers in the hallways grew softer. But the quiet didn't bring comfort. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, the kind that made people glance twice and lower their voices when she walked by. She had learned to hold her head high, pretending she didn't hear, pretending it didn't hurt. But deep down it always did. No matter how strong she tried to be, words left marks that couldn't always be seen. Her secret still remained her own, a truth she guarded closely. It wasn't because she didn't trust anyone. It was because she feared they wouldn't understand. The things she carried inside her heart weren't simple. They were shaped by long nights, quiet tears, and moments that tested her spirit. At home, her mother noticed the change. The way her daughter's laughter came less often. The way her eyes seemed distant, like she was lost in a world far away. Her mother wanted to ask, but she also knew that sometimes children spoke when they were ready. So instead she waited, offering small acts of care, warm tea on the table, a gentle hand on her shoulder, quiet presence in the late hours. But one evening, as rain tapped gently against the window, something shifted. The girl sat by the glass, watching the droplets race down. The light from the street lamps made her reflection seem softer, almost fragile. Her mother walked over and sat beside her without a word. For a moment, they just listened to the rain. Then the girl whispered, Do you ever feel like no one really sees you? Her mother looked at her, eyes warm and full of quiet understanding. All the time, she said softly. But I've learned something important. Even when it feels like no one sees you, someone always does. Maybe not the people you expect, but there's always someone who notices your quiet strength. The girl didn't respond right away, but her eyes glistened. For the first time in a while, she felt like she could breathe. At school the next day, she decided to do something she hadn't done in months. She raised her hand during class. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, the teacher's kind smile gave her courage. She explained a problem on the board, and for once the room wasn't filled with giggles or whispers. It was quiet, respectful. When she finished, the teacher nodded proudly. "Well done," he said. It was simple, but it meant everything. That small moment changed something inside her. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong, it was about proving to herself that she could still shine. But not everyone was ready to let her be. A few students still found joy in their cruelty. One afternoon, as she walked to her locker, she found papers scattered across the floor. Her notes ripped and crumpled. A few of them had words written across them. Words meant to hurt. She froze for a second, the sting hitting deep. But this time she didn't run away. She crouched down, calmly picked up the papers and said nothing. A boy from her class, who had watched it happen, stepped forward. He didn't know her well, but something about her quiet strength moved him. He bent down to help gather the papers. "They're just trying to get to you," he said softly. "Don't let them." She looked up at him and managed a small, tired smile. "I won't," she said. That small act of kindness gave her another push. It reminded her that not everyone was cruel, that kindness still existed in corners she didn't expect. As days turned into weeks, she started spending time in the art room after classes. The teacher noticed her drawings, simple, honest sketches that carried emotion. One day, he approached her and asked if she'd be interested in joining an art competition. She hesitated at first, unsure of herself, but he encouraged her gently. "You have something to say through your work," he told her. "Let people see it." She decided to give it a try. Every day after school, she stayed behind, working quietly. Her drawings became her voice. She poured into them everything she couldn't say out loud. The pain, the hope, the strength, the silence. Each line she drew was like a piece of her heart being understood. When the day of the competition arrived, she felt nervo months had passed since that rainy night when she had finally found her strength again. The hallways that once felt narrow and suffocating now seemed wider, brighter, more open. She no longer avoided the crowds or kept her head down when she walked to class. The same walls that once whispered hurtful words now carried new echoes, laughter, greetings, and small moments of kindness. Change had come slowly, but it had come. She had become someone others looked to for courage. The group she helped start had grown beyond what anyone imagined. Students from all grades began showing up to talk, to listen, to find comfort in knowing they weren't alone. Every week new faces appeared, some shy, some still carrying invisible bruises, but all finding a little bit of peace there. One afternoon, as she arranged the chairs for their meeting, she paused and looked around the small room. It was filled with posters, drawings, and notes written by the students, words of hope, reminders to be kind, to listen, to care. She smiled softly. This room had become something beautiful, proof that something good could grow even from pain. When the others started arriving, the room filled with quiet chatter. There was laughter now, the kind that wasn't forced. A boy spoke about how he was finally making friends again. Another girl shared that she'd started writing in her journal to express her feelings. Every voice mattered. Every story had a place. When it was her turn to speak, she stood for a moment, unsure how to start. Then she said, "When I first came here, I didn't think I would ever feel okay again. I thought the hurt would stay forever. But I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding meaning in what happened. It means using what hurt you to help others." There was a silence in the room after she spoke, the kind of silence that meant people were really listening. After the meeting ended, a younger student approached her. He looked nervous, his hands twisting together. "Can I tell you something?" he asked quietly. She nodded, offering him a seat. He sat down and stared at the floor for a moment before speaking. "People used to make fun of me too," he said, "for the way I talk, for the way I dress. I used to hate coming here every day. But then I saw you, and I thought, if she can still smile, maybe I can too." She felt a lump in her throat. She didn't know what to say. So she just placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You can, and one day you'll help someone else believe it too." That night, when she walked home, she felt the air cool and soft. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gentle colors. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel small or scared. She felt strong, quietly, steadily strong. At home, her mother was waiting by the kitchen table, smiling as soon as she walked in. "You look happy," her mother said. "I think I am," she replied. "It's strange. For so long I thought I'd never be." Her mother reached over and took her hand. "Sometimes happiness doesn't come all at once," she said softly. "It grows piece by piece," she nodded. That night she opened her old sketchbook. The pages were filled with drawings, some dark, some hopeful. She turned to a blank page and began to draw again. But this time there was no rain, no sadness. Instead, she drew light, soft and warm, spreading across the page. At school the next week, things felt different again. One of the teachers announced that their student group would be featured in the school's newsletter. The principal called her to the office, smiling. "You've started something special here," he said. "You've changed the atmosphere in this school. People are talking, helping each other. That's no small thing." She felt shy hearing it, but also proud. She had never wanted recognition. All she wanted was to make things a little better, for herself and for others. As she left the office, she saw one of the girls who used to tease her standing near the lockers. Their eyes met briefly. For a moment, the air felt tense. Then, to her surprise, the girl looked down and said quietly, "Hey, congratulations. You did something good." The words were awkward, hesitant, but they were real. The girl nodded once and walked away. And for the first time, there was no anger in her heart, only peace. Later that week, the school held an assembly. The principal spoke about kindness and courage, about how one student's strength had inspired change. When her name was mentioned, applause filled the room. She walked up to the stage, heart pounding. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, but when she looked out at the crowd, she didn't see bullies or strangers. She saw classmates, people learning, growing, trying. She took a deep breath and said, "I used to think being quiet made me weak, but I learned that sometimes strength is quiet. It's choosing to keep going even when you're scared. It's forgiving even when you remember everything. It's believing that tomorrow can be better." The room stayed silent for a moment before everyone began clapping again. Her teacher wiped away a tear. Her mother, sitting in the back row, smiled proudly. After the assembly, people came up to her, students she barely knew, teachers, even those who once avoided her. They said kind things, shared their own struggles, and thanked her for being brave enough to speak. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. Weeks passed and life slowly settled into something peaceful. The seasons changed. The once cold mornings grew warmer. The laughter in the halls no longer felt cruel. And though she still had quiet moments where memories stung, they didn't define her anymore. One afternoon, as she sat under a tree near the school courtyard, she saw a group of students walking by. Among them was the same younger boy who had once come to her for advice. He smiled and waved. She waved back, feeling proud, not just of him, but of how far they had all come. She opened her notebook again, the one she now carried everywhere. Inside were words and sketches, pieces of her journey. On one page she wrote, "You don't have to be loud to be strong. Sometimes strength whispers," and that was her truth. Years later, when she looked back on those school days, she would remember the pain, yes, but also the light that followed. She would remember the faces of people who helped her heal, the moments of kindness that changed everything. She would remember the day she decided not to be defined by what others said, but by who she truly was. She grew up, went on to study art, and began working with children, especially those who struggled to fit in. She told them her story, not as a tale of sadness, but as proof that they could overcome too. Her once secret pain had become her way of helping others find their voice. One afternoon, many years later, she returned to her old school for a visit. The hallways had been painted anew, the lockers brighter, the air filled with energy. Students hurried past, chatting and laughing. She smiled as she walked those familiar paths. The walls didn't seem haunted anymore, they felt alive. In the main hallway, she noticed a mural on the wall. It showed students standing together, helping one another, with a line of words painted above them. "Be kind. Everyone carries a story you may know." No. Her heart swelled with emotion. She stepped closer, tracing the words lightly with her fingers. Then, At the corner of the mural, she saw something small. Her name, written in neat letters, and a note beside it, inspired by her story. Tears filled her eyes, but they were warm, grateful tears. She smiled softly, whispering to herself, it was worth it, every single moment. Before leaving, she sat on the bench near the entrance and watched students walk by. Some greeted her without even knowing who she was. Others smiled politely. She noticed how different the atmosphere felt, open, kind, welcoming. The school had changed, but maybe it was she who had changed first. When she finally stood to go, she took one last look at the place that had once held her pain. It was now a place of growth, of hope. She stepped outside, the afternoon sun warm on her face, and breathed in deeply. As she walked down the familiar path home, she thought about the journey, the loneliness, the tears, the quiet courage, and the eventual peace. It hadn't been easy, but she had made it through, and she knew now that her secret, the one nobody knew, wasn't something dark or shameful. It was her resilience, her heart, her ability to keep believing in goodness when the world seemed unkind. In the end, her story wasn't just about bullying or survival. It was about transformation, about finding light after darkness, about realizing that kindness, no matter how small, could change everything. And so with every step she took, she carried that truth with her, not as a burden, but as a promise to never stop seeing the light, even in the darkest hallways, but also strangely peaceful. Her artwork hung among others, colorful and bright, but hers stood out in a quiet way. It was simple, black and white, showing a girl standing in the rain holding a small light. The judges stopped for a long time in front of it. They didn't say much, but she could see something in their eyes. They understood. Later, when they announced the winners, her name was called. She blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. As she walked to the stage, the room clapped. Even some of the classmates who once laughed at her joined in, though awkwardly. For her, it wasn't about winning. It was about being seen, really seen for who she was. That night, she placed the small trophy on her shelf and stared at it. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "See, I told you someone would notice." But deep inside, she knew this wasn't just about art. It was about finding her strength again. Her secret wasn't just about pain anymore. It was about resilience. Still, something else was coming. Something she hadn't expected. The next week, the principal called her into the office. She walked in nervously, clutching her backpack. The principal smiled kindly and motioned for her to sit. "I wanted to talk to you about something good," he said. "Your story has inspired a few teachers. We want to start a new student group, one where people can talk about what they go through without judgment. We'd like you to help lead it." Her eyes widened. "Me?" she asked softly. "Yes, you," he said. "You've shown courage and empathy. You can help others find their voices too." She didn't know what to say. For a long moment, she sat there in silence. Then slowly she nodded. "Okay," she said. "I'll try." When the group started, only a few students joined at first. But word spread. Soon more came. Students who had also been teased, ignored, or felt alone. The girl listened to their stories, shared her own, and offered the kind of kindness she once longed for. She became someone others looked up to, though she never asked for it. Months passed, and the hallway that once felt like a battlefield began to change. The same walls that echoed with laughter and cruelty now carried softer sounds. Greetings, conversations, even laughter that didn't hurt. The change wasn't sudden, but it was real, and every time she walked through those hallways, she did so with quiet confidence. Not because everyone liked her now, but because she finally liked herself. Her secret had become her power, a reminder that even in silence, strength can grow. Late one evening, as she sat at her desk looking at her old drawings, she smiled. She realized that her story wasn't about being bullied. It was about finding light where no one thought it could exist. Outside, the rain began to fall again, tapping gently against the window, just like that night months ago. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular. Because sometimes healing doesn't come all at once. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like rain washing away the dust of yesterday, leaving behind something new, her face. It felt like her mother's voice was still in the room, whispering those words. From that moment, she made herself a promise. She would honor her mother by continuing her art, not just for herself, but for others. At school, she returned to the art club after a few weeks. Everyone greeted her warmly. The younger kids ran to her, showing her drawings they had made while she was away. One of them said shyly, "We made these for you." She smiled through her tears. "Thank you. They're beautiful." Her teacher looked at her and said softly, "You're stronger than you think." She nodded. "I have to be." For her. As the weeks passed, she started a new project, a mural on one of the school's hallway walls. It was her idea and the principal approved it. "Something that will inspire everyone who walks these halls," she explained. The students helped her paint it after school. Slowly, a masterpiece began to appear. It showed a hallway filled with faceless people, but in the center stood a girl holding a sketchbook that glowed with color. Around her, the shadows faded into light. It was a story without words, her story. When it was finished, everyone stopped to admire it. Even the students who had once bullied her stood quietly, staring. One whispered, "That's her, isn't it?" Another replied softly, "Yeah, and it's beautiful." The girl didn't need to hear their apologies this time. The mural was her answer. She had transformed her pain, her loss, and her loneliness into something that touched everyone who saw it. A few weeks later, the principal called her into the office. "We've been contacted by a local art foundation," he said with a smile. "They saw photos of the mural and want to feature it in a youth art magazine. They'd also like to meet you." Her eyes widened. "Me?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said. "You've inspired this whole school. Now you'll inspire even more." She couldn't believe it. The hallway that had once been her place of pain had become the reason people were celebrating her. That evening, she stood in front of the mural alone, tracing the outlines with her fingers. "You were right, Mom," she whispered. "My gift wasn't just for me." As the sun set and the hallway lights flickered on, she smiled. The same place that once echoed with cruel laughter now glowed with warmth and admiration. Her journey wasn't over, but she knew she was walking a new path, one filled with color, courage, and hope, one said. "She actually thinks she's an artist." Her face burned, her hands shook. For a moment, all the progress she had made felt like it was slipping away. She ran to the restroom, locked the stall, and sat quietly as tears filled her eyes. It felt like she was right back where she started, small and humiliated. But then she remembered her mother's words. "Don't let their noise stop your song." She took a deep breath, wiped her tears, and stood up. When she came out, the hallway was still buzzing with laughter, but this time she didn't run. She walked straight to the board, took down the papers, and folded them neatly. The same teacher who had believed in her saw what happened. Later that day, he called her aside. "I'm sorry this happened," he said softly. "Sometimes when people see light, they try to dim it. But that only proves that your light shines bright." She smiled weakly. "It's okay," she said. "I'm used to it." He looked at her seriously. "No, don't get used to it. You deserve kindness. Remember that." That night, when she told her mother what happened, her mother looked worried. "You could talk to the principal," she suggested. The girl shook her head. "No, I don't want to make it a big deal. I just want to keep drawing." Her mother nodded, understanding. "Then keep doing what you love. That's your answer to the world." Weeks passed again. The whispers faded, as they always did when something new caught people's attention. But something else began to happen. A few younger students started approaching her quietly, asking if she could show them how to draw. At first she hesitated, but then she agreed. She stayed after school, teaching them simple sketches. Soon, what began as 2 students became 5, then 10. The art teacher noticed and decided to start an after-school art club, with her as the assistant. She couldn't believe it. Standing in front of the group, she felt nervous, but the children's excitement gave her courage. They listened to her, smiled at her, and treated her with respect. One day, as she was leaving the art room, the same popular girl who had mocked her approached. "Hey," she said quietly, looking uncomfortable. "I just wanted to say, sorry. For what happened?" The quiet girl looked at her, unsure what to say, but she saw honesty in her eyes. "It's okay," she said softly. "It's over." The other girl nodded and smiled faintly. "You're really good. I mean it." That moment felt like a small victory, not just over the bullying, but over her own fear. She had faced the same hallway that once broke her, and this time she stood tall. That evening, as she sat by her mother again, She showed her a drawing of the art club, all the kids smiling, their hands covered in colors. Her mother smiled through tears. "You see," she said softly, "your secret wasn't something to hide. It was something the world needed." The girl nodded, her heart full. The same hallway that once made her feel invisible had become the place where her light began to shine. But her journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, ones that would test her courage even more deeply. Yet for the first time she believed she could face them, because she had finally learned who she was. No one had ever said that to her before. For a moment she didn't know how to respond. "Thank you," she whispered. The teacher smiled and walked away, but those two words stayed in her heart all day. Maybe, just maybe, someone finally saw her for who she really was. That night she told her mother about it. Her mother smiled, her eyes shining. "See," she said. "I've always told you. Your gift will take you places one day." The girl laughed softly. "It's just a hobby." Her mother shook her head. "No, it's who you are." As days passed, she continued drawing, not for others, but for herself. But she didn't know that soon everything would change. The world that ignored her was about to see what she had kept hidden for so long, a secret that would silence every whisper in that hallway.